It finally happened. One of the big two MMOs has been ported to mobile. Final Fantasy XIV announced that Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is on the way, and there's one of two emotions players are going to have when they hear this. It's either going to be excitement or sheer terror. And by the way, the footage on the screen right now is from Final Fantasy XIV Mobile. So in this video, I'm going to tell you what Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is and what it isn't. I'm also going to answer the biggest questions I know you're going to have, like, is there going to be cross progression? How will it be monetized? And how is a game where your character has 20 abilities going to be played on a mobile device where you only have 2 thumbs? So let's dive into the video. Let's talk about all of that and more. And shout out to Lightspeed for sponsoring the video. I'll talk more about them later. The first question we should answer is, what is Final Fantasy XIV Mobile? Like, obviously it's Final Fantasy XIV on mobile, but what does that mean? Because that could mean a lot of things. And if Final Fantasy XIV Mobile sounds interesting to you, be sure to head over to ffxivmobile.com to pre-register now. According to Yoshi P, the goal is for it to be a faithful reproduction of the original work. It will include Final Fantasy XIV's amazing story and its duties. And the way that they're going to do this is Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is going to launch at 2.0, or in other words, at Realm Reborn. And then over time, they're going to add the other expansions to mobile that have already been released on PC and console. So you won't have access to some of the jobs that have come in later expansions. Those are likely going to be added later when those expansions have been added to the mobile version of the game. If you can't remember which jobs were available at 2.0, don't worry, I've got you covered. They're going to be the Gladiator, which turns into the Paladin, the Marauder, which turns into the Warrior, the Lancer, which turns into the Dragoon, the Pugilist, which turns into the Monk, the Archer, which turns into the Bard, the Thaumaturge, which turns into the Black Mage, the Arcanist, which turns into the Summoner and the Scholar, and then finally the Conjurer, which is going to turn into the White Mage. And as for the races, you'll be able to play as any of the game's races. So with that in mind, which job and race combination are you going to go for first in Final Fantasy XIV Mobile? As mentioned, the story is going to start as the same place as the original game, at Realm Reborn. And then their plan is to release the follow-up expansions over time, and how fast they release them is going to largely depend on player feedback. The more voraciously players are consuming the content, the more rapidly they're going to try to release the subsequent expansions. Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is really trying to recreate everything that is great about Final Fantasy XIV, including the Gold Saucer and Triple Triad. This makes perfect sense to me. I think these are the two easiest things to port into Final Fantasy XIV Mobile, because these two things have always felt like they could have been a great standalone mobile game anyway. Now let's circle back to a big question I know everybody's gonna have, and that's, is the game going to have crossplay? Will you be able to play your Final Fantasy XIV characters on Final Fantasy Mobile? Will you be able to go and level up crafting from your mobile phone in front of the TV? And sadly, the answer is no. While the game is aiming to recreate everything that makes Final Fantasy XIV, it isn't exactly a one-for-one replication. Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XIV Mobile will be operated, developed, and played separately, but with the goal of them ultimately offering the same Eorzea experience that players have come to love. So Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is being made by Lightspeed Studios and overseen by Yoshi P and Square Enix. And so for that reason, it will feature almost everything you love about Final Fantasy XIV, but unfortunately, it won't have the ability for crossplay. So the story, the duties, and core combat principles, right? These are all things that the game is going to have in common with the new version of the game. However, there's also going to be some differences between the two versions of the games. For example, the primary difference between Final Fantasy XIV and Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is that while 14 was designed for PC and console, where you could sit down and immerse yourself for extended periods of time, Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is being designed for you to play the game in short bursts, perhaps even while on the go. Now, if you're anything like me, you've got more questions. Like, for instance, playing on a computer with one of these and playing on a console with one of these is very different than playing on your phone where all you've got are 2 of these. So as a result, there's definitely been some changes to the controls and the combat. They had to adjust each job and its mechanics to still perform its roles in the party systems, so you're still going to have the trinity of tank, healer, and DPS and group play, but it's also going to have been altered to be playable on mobile. Yoshi P was a little light on details on the specifics of how they've pulled this off, but I'm expecting that they've greatly truncated the list of skills each job is going to be expected to manage in their party, because having 2 thumbs and being responsible for 18 different abilities doesn't sound entirely feasible. However, Yoshi does say that they have designed the UI and optimized it for high difficulty content with a large number of actions. It will be interesting to see what concessions have been made to the skill lists the jobs have access to allow the game to go from full keyboard or controller to using your 2 thumbs. Aside from the monetization, I think this is going to be the hardest thing for them to effectively translate in the Final Fantasy XIV experience, because the flow of combat and the combat systems and the synergies are one of the things that is core to the Final Fantasy XIV experience. Final Fantasy XIV's combat is something that the Final Fantasy XIV community loves, whether it's the flashiness of the spells, using your burst abilities, your cooldowns, right? All of that kind of works together to create what we know as Final Fantasy XIV combat. So is Final Fantasy XIV Mobile going to have abilities for you to press in between your cooldown? Is it going to have the same global cooldown as Final Fantasy XIV Online? I've got a lot of questions about the combat, but I don't have all of the answers just yet. When I play Final Fantasy XIV, I'm using an MMO mouse with 12 buttons on it, right? So I've got the 12 buttons, and then I use shift to get another set of 12 buttons, and then I use control to see yet another set of 12 buttons. So I've got nearly 36 keybinds when I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV, which you could easily get away with a lot less than that. But still, I mean, it's a game that has a lot of buttons by design. I'm really curious how they're going to solve that solution for playing with 2 thumbs. And as a result, understandably, Yoshi was worried it was going to be hard to provide the Final Fantasy XIV experience on mobile. However, he says that he's impressed with Lightspeed Studios' ability to create the mobile version of Final Fantasy XIV. And he's been overseeing the game's development and giving them tons of feedback. And fortunately, it sounds like Lightspeed has been really receptive to Yoshi's feedback. And as a result, he's been happy with how the game has developed so far. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, because a lot of players are going to be really excited to hear, oh man, I can play Final Fantasy XIV, my favorite MMO, on my phone. Awesome. And then there's also the other side of our brain, which is saying, oh no, they're bringing mobile monetization to my favorite MMO. Curses, what are they going to do to this game? What's going to be the outcome of this? And I think that those are both very justified feelings. I haven't seen a lot of games get ported to mobile in a way that was done with the player's best interests in mind. It's almost always the result that these mobile games are over monetized. And so when I was listening to Yoshi P talk about Final Fantasy XIV Mobile, I was really eager to hear his thoughts on mobile monetization, how they were going to approach it, what their plan was, and if he recognized that mobile games have a very real problem when it comes to monetization, where their focus is not so much on making sure that you stick around and play the game for a long time, but their focus is instead on extracting as much money from you as possible, either through gambling mechanics like gacha or some other type of monetization. And fortunately, that was one of the first things he addressed when he started talking about the monetization of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile. He says that while the computer version of the game is a subscription based, on console and computer, we've played the game with a subscription. And the monetization of Final Fantasy XIV has been one of the things that helped it stand above the rest. You could log into the game and you could go out and earn all the coolest mounts. You can log into the game and you can go earn all the coolest weapons and the coolest armor, right? All the coolest fashion. You can go and you can earn that when you log into the game. And it gives you a great incentive to participate in all the different pieces of content. In fact, it's one of the primary incentives for most players, if not the primary incentive for most players, to participate in all of these different types of content, to get these different achievements. It's for the fashion, ultimately. So your character looks even cooler the next time a new piece of content comes out. So how do you translate that to mobile? Is it going to be subscription based? Well, Yoshi P says no, it is not going to be subscription based. Instead, it's going to be free to play with microtransactions in an attempt to make the monetization model more appealing to the mobile audience, because frankly, he doesn't expect that they would be willing to pay a subscription to play an MMO. Is that true? I don't know. Has any quality game ever tried a subscription model on mobile? I don't know. I don't think so. Not that I can think of. So it's going to be free to play with microtransactions, but it's not going to have gacha or gambling stuff like that. That stuff that really, it serves to pull money out of you as opposed to keep you in the game and playing in the long term. And that's what he said he wants to focus. He wants the monetization of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile to focus on retaining the player, on keeping them around for the long term and keeping them along for the ride as all of the expansions come out and the story unfolds. That's how Yoshi has chosen to monetize Final Fantasy XIV for PC and console. And he's hoping to take that into the mobile monetization, albeit in a slightly different form. So I'm totally with you guys when it comes to being concerned about mobile monetization. I think that's totally fair. But on the other hand, Yoshi P has not let us down yet. If there's any MMO game director that would do right by his community when porting his game to mobile, it's Yoshi P. I can't think of any other studio or any other director I could say that about in the way that I can say that about Yoshi P. Just because, I mean, his MMO literally doesn't even have a cash shop in the game. You have to minimize it, open a tab in a browser window, and go there to shop for items in the game. He has been unique, if nothing else, in the way that he's chosen to monetize Final Fantasy XIV. And so my hope is that the way he monetizes the mobile game is just as unique to that space. Unfortunately, outside of the fact that the game is not going to be gacha and gamble based monetization, they were pretty light on details on how it is going to be monetized. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they don't exactly know that answer yet. So the plan for the game moving forward is going to be to release it in different regions and do monetization testing there on the model, get feedback, and then apply that, right? So they don't know exactly how it's going to be monetized because they're going to test the monetization methods. And if you're someone like me, you know, you might be an existing player and you're not sure you're going to have time to have a whole new character just for your phone that you spend time on, that's okay. You know, Yoshi P totally understands that. He says that the primary audience they hope to reach is the mobile players that are reluctant or unable to play games on console and PC. So Final Fantasy XIV Mobile isn't so much being designed to get players like myself that are already playing Final Fantasy XIV online, as it is intended to reach a new audience of players, a new generation of players that aren't already playing Final Fantasy XIV. The Final Fantasy franchise has been one of my favorite franchises since I was just a little kid. You know, I discovered Final Fantasy VII. I had a friend in school that was telling me all about Final Fantasy VII. He was telling me how good it was, how many discs he had to install it. I was in awe. So I went and got it, and then we both would just play it all day, all night, every night, and we'd talk about it in school the next day. It was life-changing. It really was. And I've been hooked on the franchise ever since then. And before that, I was a big fan of Secret of Mana, right? So Square Enix's JRPGs have been a fixture in my life for a really long time. And so I'm really curious to see how they decide to port Final Fantasy to mobile. It's a really important franchise to them, and I think that they're going to try to do it right. And if they combine everything that's great about JRPGs with everything that's great about Final Fantasy XIV, they could have one of the best mobile games ever released. And Yoshi P says, you know, the main appeal of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is that the game takes place in an ever-expanding world while also getting to tap into the Final Fantasy XIV community, which is easily one of the nicest, if not the nicest, online gaming community that I've ever experienced. And it's really not even close, right? The people inside of this community are uniquely nice. I don't know any other way to put it than that. And there's a lot of theories as to why that might be. My leading theory is that it's because Final Fantasy XIV puts way more effort into creating a nice community than any other MMO does by actually enforcing the TOS. Like, don't be a horrible person in game or else we'll punish you. You know, every game says that, but almost every game doesn't actually follow through with that rule, right? You've still got the guy at the end of the dungeon telling you you're a piece of crap and your DPS is horrible or whatever mean thing he decides to say before he leaves the group. Final Fantasy XIV is the only game that actually actively punishes those players by, you know, suspending them for a while. So I think it's their proactive response to those types of players that has created a community that they have now. It's the effort they put in that the other MMOs don't, frankly. And if you're a mobile gamer that's never played Final Fantasy XIV before, be excited because this is probably one of the best games that could possibly be ported to the mobile device. It's just perfect for it. The more I think about it, the more I see how well this could work. You've just got a really amazing long form story in Final Fantasy XIV. You've got some incredible duties that the players can participate in. You've got Gold Saucer, you've got Triple Triad, just all of it I can see working really well on the mobile platform. And like I said, you couldn't ask a better game director to do it than Yoshi P. So fingers crossed that this turns out to be a really good game for you guys. So another thing players might be wondering is, how is Final Fantasy XIV Mobile going to affect Final Fantasy XIV? And the answer is it shouldn't. It won't really, because Final Fantasy XIV Mobile is being developed by another studio So it's going to be their time that is taken away. You know, you won't see Final Fantasy 14 slow down because they're working on Final Fantasy 14 mobile. That's not what's going to happen. Square Enix is still making Final Fantasy 14. Lightspeed Studios is making Final Fantasy 14 mobile. As of right now, we don't have a specific release date. They're going to start rolling the game out regionally for testing and getting feedback from players. You know, what do you like? What do you not like? What's right? What's wrong? What do you think of this monetization model? Is it too little? Is it too much? Right? They're going to get all that feedback, and then they're going to finally release the game. So there's everything we know about Final Fantasy 14 mobile. But what do you think? I'm really curious to know what Final Fantasy 14 players think about this, what people that have not played Final Fantasy 14 think about this. You know, are you really excited for a chance to finally be able to play this game on another platform? And what are you guys thinking, Final Fantasy 14 players? Are you going to dive in, check it out, just see what it's like, maybe make a character and try to play it, you know, when you're not able to be on your computer and on your console? Because we've all got those times where we've got our phone, but we don't have access to our computer. We don't have access to our console. And I could easily see myself thinking, well, hey, if I'm going to play something on my phone in the meantime, there's not a lot of better options than Final Fantasy 14. So, hey, you know, it could be something fun. So let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, because I know you guys have got some thoughts. If you want to hear more about Final Fantasy 14 mobile, be sure to check out IGN. They are also going to have some information out on it as well. And if you want to be kept up to date on Final Fantasy 14 mobile, I'll put a link to all their socials down in the description below so that you can conveniently, you know, check in and follow those if you'd like to. Massive shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thanks so much for supporting the channel in the big way you guys do. If you want to become a channel member for behind the scenes footage and access to a private Discord channel and more, be sure to click the join button down below. If you're not sure what to do next, check out one of these other MMO videos popping up on screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.